Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. And let's start doing some ink drawing. Thanks for being willing to ink draw with me. I know that it's a little scary sometimes, it's a little intimidating, but a little practice, you'll get it. Again, we're going to start out simple shapes. Look at his hat, his head, even the sword. The sword is kind of an elongated rectangle. His hand. You can say to yourself, well, I want his hat to be almost to the very top of my page. You can come in and just go, okay, I want that hat to come over here. I want it to be this large. Give yourself a little more space on the right than on the left. Anytime you start drawing humans, the head is kind of an oval. I'm going to put his hand down here as a rectangle, even though it's not quite a rectangle, but almost. But remember, we're just blocking things in, simple shapes to begin with. We can always add more to it. His sword is more like a hanger than it is a cutlass. A cutlass usually curves. So when I look at that, if your line's curved, that's okay. We'll just say it's a cutlass. If it doesn't, that's fine too. Come right off his chin. That's where his shoulder goes, right over there. And he's got, oh my goodness, stuff just hanging down. It is not important that we draw that stuff. All that stuff, his gun, that I think that's a plug bayonet that's over there hanging out there. It's a dagger, and that little end goes inside the gun. Yeah. What's important here is the face. That's where we're all. That's where our eye goes. Just keep going. You start out with your simple shapes. If it's too big or too small, just adjust it. But remember to use the entire surface of your page. That's good composition. And again, I'm leaving a little bit more space on the right side, just a little bit of breathing space. His arm, because it's very rectangular, it kind of comes down and curves right there. That's going to relate to this edge over here, and that's good composition. You can even have it almost touching that edge if you want to. But just simple shapes. And then as you come to the head and you think, okay, I gotta block in this head somehow. This little hat, some people call it a tricorn hat. In the day, they called them cocked hats. So it's a cocked hat. Tricorn is a modern term for it. And then we want to get the eyes. The eyes are right below the hat and that bandana that's around his head. So you could just block those in if you want to. Just with a little shape. There's no eye there. I just shaded that in. Same thing with the other one. You just want to get them about the right distance from each other. The nose, don't worry about the bridge of the nose. People who are learning to draw faces often will draw a line down the nose. It's not there. Don't put that in there. All you need is just this little shadow underneath the nose, right there. And then, of course, his mouth, which is bordered by this mustache. If you wanted to, you could just throw in the mustache real quick. Remember, everything gets erased. So just very basic basics. And then right below his bottom lip, this little patch of hair that's right there, you just do that with a little shadow. That's really all you need. The rest of that we're going to do with ink. So all we're doing is just getting our proportions, just putting in a guide, if you will. I'm going to draw his little beard, just little triangles as they come down off his chin. You want his eyes, his nose, and his mouth to all be in the same direction. And if you're a little uncomfortable about things like eyes and nose and mouth, which are the most important areas, you could lightly draw them in. Just remember that everything gets erased with your pencil. I'm just going to kind of go in with my pencil and just very lightly put in some shapes. This is also going to help me to get my proportions correct. Can't see his eyebrows. They get covered up by that bandana. You know, it's funny how iconographical movies can make things. You go to any pirate thing now and you're going to find people dressed like Captain Jack. Most of what we feel about pirates comes from an artist named N.C. Wyeth, who back in the turn of the century, 1900s, was painting pirate stories like Treasure Island, and his pirates became the iconographic image of pirates with their sashes and things like that. Most of the time, pirates dress just like common people. If you've got your picture on your computer and you want to do some little tight details, or you want to look in there and see what's going on, you can zoom into them easier. I'm going to start with the top eyelid. And his top eyelid, he's got that mascara stuff around there. I'm going to put that in there with just kind of a little edge, a little line. And if you're a little concerned about it and you think, oh, I'm not really sure if that's right, little dots and dashes will work out just fine. I'm just going to throw in some little line to show where it's darker. Even though his eyes are kind of wide, you don't see the entire part of his iris. And so I'm just going to put that in with a couple little dots. If that's not quite in the right place, I can always change it. If you put a line in there, it's hard to change. And then the other side, I'm going to put that in with little dots too. The iris part of his eye may not be as pronounced, depending on the shadows and things like that. You do have these lights in his eyes. You got two of them in there. One of them's from the flash. The other one's probably from an umbrella or something. This is a professional photography. Technically, you only need to put in one. And if you want to make it oval, you're more than welcome to. I'm just going to throw in a dark edge with his little half moon, just like this. Now, his eyes are very dark. And so all you got to do is just hatch through them. More at the top than you do at the bottom. And that'll make his eyes look a little more alive. So I'm going to hatch through them and little starburst kinds of things. So I'm just go away from the pupil. I'm going to keep out that little highlight area there. And you can always add a little more dots and dashes, whatever you feel like you need. Remember, with ink, you start out with the least amount possible because you can always add more. He's got a little shadow right up there next to the bridge of his nose, and it comes off of his little bandana. So I'm just going to add that with these little hatch lines. Come down the bridge of his nose, and then end with some little dots, and that's about it. Any kind of wrinkles. Now, he's got some smile lines under his eye. You never want to use those with line. It'll make him look kind of silly. So you want to use little hatched lines. So all around his eye, I'm going to use these little hatched lines. And they culminate into a dot. The dot would be the end. So anywhere that you feel like you need a little darkness, just little hatched lines. And maybe a couple little dots. We can always come back in and darken this up if we want to. Even his eye, if you think his eye is too light, you may want to come in and darken that up. The corner of his eye is not this bright, so I'm going to put one little dot in the corner of his eye. If I can touch it, I just don't want to touch it too hard. And that just darkened in that little corner because it's not white. And then his eyes are very, very dark. I'm just going to put in some more little dots and dashes until it is what I want it to be. So I just kind of keep going. Just in the back of your mind, though, remember, less is more here. And just crosshatch through anything that you think is going to be helpful to get that dark. I'm going to do the same thing with the other eye. I'm going to start out with the little bridge of the nose, a little hatch through it, go up into the eyebrow. Same thing with the eye. I'm going to start out with that top eyelid. A couple little dots for the iris. Try to make those eyes nice and round. There's his pupil. And then hatch through it. Try to leave out that little shine in the eye. And little dots and dashes, whatever you feel like you need. Here's the wrinkle under his eye. Again, you can use dots or dashes, or just try to avoid a solid line. And you may have to come into this and darken it in a little bit here and there. Now, when doing the noses, again, try to avoid any line down the nose for now. We might have to come in and just do a couple little hatch lines in there for this little triangular shadow that comes down by his nostril. But for the most part, you want to start out with a little Nike swoosh, an upside down Nike swoosh for his nostril. And you can start out that way with this little swoosh that comes around, and then just hatch through that. The hatch lines make it so that it's not a solid edge on the bottom. There's a little shadow around his nostril here and on the tip of his nose. So I'm going to put that in there just really quick. Little hatch lines. And under his nose, little hatch lines. His other nostril, I'm just going to hatch through that little dark shape there. Not really going to put anything there. Just a little dark shape. A couple little dots for that other nostril, and you got it. Now, there is some shadow under there, and so what I'm going to do is just going to look at that triangle shape that's in there. And you can put a couple little dots and dashes if you want to just show where that goes. And then I'm just going to hatch through it very quickly. Maybe a couple on this other side, just a couple. A couple dots and dashes. That's about it. This nostril is a little darker, so I may want to throw in some hatch lines in that nostril. Just a couple. Maybe some dots and dashes. His shadow under his nose is a little darker, so I'm going to hatch through that. And then that goes right into his mustache. So his mustache is just going to be these little feathered lines like we did with our wolf. I'm just going to start out here and just go in the direction that the hair flows and just do these little hatched lines. Remember, some curve down, some curve up. Some are longer, some are shorter. His mustache must end, though, with the corner of his eye. So if you come straight down off the corner of his eye, the outside edge, that's about where his mustache ends. And we may have to go back into that and do more. The other one's about the same. It doesn't quite go out as far because it's curving. Then when you're doing lips, remember the corners of the mouth are usually darker. So I can come in from the edge of the nose, just the tip of the nose right here, come straight down. That's about where that corner of the mouth is. I'm just going to put in this little shape, triangle shape right there. And another one over here. And it is about the middle of the eye, straight down. And then where these meet, there's this little divot right there. So I'm just going to kind of go a little wider and then narrower. And the top of the lip, where it kind of comes up and curves, don't draw a line there. Just hatch through it. Hatch, 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 hatch. Same thing on the other side. I'm just going to hatch through it. And I need more black in there, so I'm going to go back into that mustache. Not everywhere, just here and there. Couple little lines for his bottom lip. There is a little edge of his bottom lip, but you could do little dots and dashes in there for the bottom lip. So I'm just going to put in a couple little dots on this side, maybe a couple over on this side, maybe a little dash right there. And And maybe a few on the middle part there. His mouth is slightly open, so if we put a little bit of darkness in there, I'll make his mouth look slightly open. And just some dots and dashes. Again, you don't want to have to draw a line all the way through. And then what defines that bottom lip is that little bit of hair that's under there. It kind of fans out, so I'm going to start with the middle and kind of fan out. So there's a little kind of fan shape. These on this side are going out this way. These on this side are going out this way. And you just darken that in. He has some very distinctive creases, little dimples and things. And so you can put those in with just little hatched lines. If you want to, if you're a little scared about putting them in, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to put them in the wrong place, you can go in with your pencil and just kind of say this is where they are. I mean, if you wanted to, you can say, well, this one's right next to his mustache down here. Can I make his mustache long enough? Probably could go just a hair longer. Get it? A hair longer? And then you can say, well, there's a little dimple right there, and there's a little one that comes up the side there. You can draw that in with your pencil, and then just hatch through it. Don't draw a line, just hatch through it. So you can go either way. For me, I'm going to go this way. There's one. Here's the other one. And then that's it. No more necessary. His hair defines this edge over here. And then I don't know what those beads and things are hanging down there, but you can just throw in that triangle of darkness right there. And that'll define that edge of his face. So I'm just going to throw that triangle in. And again, if you wanted to, you could go in and draw it in. The hair on this side just defines his face over there, so I'm going to throw that in. I have no idea what all that stuff is. It doesn't really matter. Just throw it in as shapes of dark and light. So I'm just going to hatch through those shapes, whatever they are. And then, of course, he's got his little beard coming off his face there. That defines his chin. And if you wanted to put in this little shadow across here, you could, across his cheek over here. You just do it as little hatched lines. Hatch, hatch, hatch. Sometimes it's those little shadows that define us as a people. This little braid, again, don't try to do the little braid, just do the darks and lights. And these little smile lines that kind of come out of his eyes, I'm just going to do little hatched lines there. Or dots or dashes, whatever you feel like you need to define those edges or those lines. And your eye's going to make that connection. It'll figure it out. Ink is one of those things, when you first start out with your ink, you're like, oh, this looks silly. But you just kind of keep going. And eventually, it'll come together. It'll look better. If you don't trust yourself, that's okay. You can trust me for now. So now I'm going back into his facial hair going, it needs to go darker. Now the fun part comes in. All the stuff that's around him. This little braid that's in there, I'm just going to shade that in with a dark edge. And then as it kind of goes and you think, well, okay, I see some of those little braided things. You can come back in and crosshatch through it. I'm just going to crosshatch through here, through there. You leave little spaces open. Nobody cares what it is. It's all just texture. I shouldn't say nobody cares. Most people probably don't even know what it is. Here's a little shadow that's under his bandana. I'm just going to kind of keep that going, just little dots and dashes. But when it gets to the forehead, I'm going to leave that out and then pick it up again over here. Leave it out and pick it up right there. Everybody knows that that's an edge. It's a line. You don't need to make a line across there. I'm going to get rid of my graphite just because that cleans it up a little bit. Any kinds of folds in fabrics, we do them kind of the same way we did in the face. Just little hatched lines. And so there's a little fold over here. I'm going to pick that up with the little hatched lines. Because it's very light. This part of the fabric is a little darker. You can hatch through the entire thing until you get to the middle, and then dots and dashes. And then the rest of it, you're just going to do little hatched lines. There's a fold right there. There's one that comes this way. Just dots and dashes. Whatever you feel like you're going to need to get that value in to tell your viewer what that surface is. Do we need that little X on his cheek? I'm going to put that in with just little scribbly. Once the face is pretty well done, I mean, you can always come back into it and do more. But once it's done, the rest of it is going to go by fairly quickly because it's all just shapes of dark and light. So I'm going to do his hat. There's a lot of in his hat that we're going to leave out. All this edge over here we'll leave out. Maybe some of this up here where the shine is. But I'm just going to I'm going to do the hat first with just all these shadows. I'm just going to pick out the shadows, shape of the shadows. They're little triangles. We can always come back into this later on too. And you can break that edge too. You can leave it out if you want to. And if it looks really light, leave it out. Just little shapes, cross-hatching, hatching, whatever is needed. If this hat were new, we'd probably use more parallel line. The hat is not new. And so you can use just about whatever kind of line you want to use in there. And you'll probably notice I'm not always going in the same direction. And if the hat is slightly off, nobody cares. I mean, they get kind of ratty. You dip them in the water every now and then. Mermaids wear them, you know, things like that. And from here, it's just kind of scribble, 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 scribble. However you want to do it. We can always come back in and do more. Get rid of graphite. If you wanted to throw in the sword right now, you could. This edge of the sword is lost, so I probably wouldn't even worry about that edge of the sword. It's gone. The rest of it gets defined by whatever this is down in here. So if you wanted to, you could put that in there. You could use a ruler, or you could use little dots and dashes like this. Just try to get them as straight as you can. And you can always line it up a little bit later. Whatever this is, that defines that edge. I have no idea what it is. His hair, you could do little curly Q things like this where his dreadlocks are. Totally up to you. Little beads, doesn't matter what they are. Just look at them, say, oh, it's a little dark shape. I'm going to throw that little dark shape in there. Just hatch through it. Can always add more. Can't tell what's going on under his chin here either. So I'm just going to hatch through that. And then his little hair, I can kind of see where that goes together. Just throwing that in. On my YouTube channel, I think I have 2 or 3 Captain Jacks in ink. He's a very popular figure to do. So if that's something you want to practice. Like I say, I don't know how to tell you to draw anything without just doing the shapes of dark and light. It's the edges that become very important. So like where his hair comes into his chin, you could just do little swirls, little scribble, 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 and then where it comes into his chin, do those little feathered lines, and it'll look fine. Guess I better finish his hat. Although the hat's the least of our worries, really. It's just, you just scribble in whatever you can there. Scribble, scribble. If that's the edge of my sword, I come straight up. There's the edge of my hat. And so you really don't need, I'm going to get rid of all that graphite because it's starting to confuse me, but once you do something like that, then you've already done the edge of your sword. You don't need to do anything else to it. Here's his hair. That defines the edge there. Little dots and dashes. Here's his collar. Hair defining that. And all of a sudden you go, oh wait, I see the blade of his sword. I didn't draw the blade of his sword. I just drew everything else around it. That negative space. Don't worry about beads and things. I mean, they're there. Just do the shapes. I know it looks like I'm drawing them, but I'm not. That's the cool thing about ink is your viewer's imagination is going to take over. It's going to see all the things that you didn't draw in. Now, I know I told you we're going to do face and hands. That's what we want to concentrate on. So we're going to concentrate on his hand a little bit here. He's got a lot of stuff going on in his hand. So I am just going to start out, again, with the shapes of the darkness. I'm going to start out with this cupped crossguard on his sword and just do that little shape that I see there. I love drawing metal. Metal is fun. He's got a little ring in there. I'm going to do that ring. It kind of comes down, if you come down the blade of his sword, his ring is right there. I'm sure that ring is probably important for something. And I wonder how much control he has over his wardrobe. Probably has more control than a lot of people do. And then there's a little finger right there that kind of comes out close to the knuckle guard. I'm just going to shade in the dark part around it. I just leave that finger hanging out. Looks like he's got some calligraphy on his hands too. So I'm not drawing his hand in. I'm not drawing the fingers. Just doing the little things around him. And I'm hoping then all that stuff will take care of itself. And you handle them the same way you do wrinkles or anything else, just shapes of darkness. And you can come through and do as much as you want to with this. Anytime you're doing wrinkles, like on his suit, don't even worry about that. Just do little hatched lines in the shape of the dark that you see, and it'll look like wrinkles. Anytime you do beads, you can just do little U shapes, kind of hanging out next to each other, and then hatch through them. There's beads. Piece of cake. And hair, we did hair when we did the wolf. Just kind of go in the direction that it flows, and then just leave it out. Sword blade is entirely gone, and that's okay. And your eye makes that connection that it even continues up there. If you wanted, you could put some little dots and dashes up there, but right now, it's not a big deal. Just let it go. All this stuff that's down in here, don't worry about it. Just shapes of dark and light. It's all about textures, too. I always feel like I have to go back into the eyes, make those pop, make them. Because once you start drawing around it, then you're like, oh, those need to go darker. Depending on how much detail you want to put in there, you just kind of keep going. I always breathe a sigh of relief when I'm done with the face and the hands. Everything else just it's not that important. So I can just throw it in, darks and lights. If you're off on some of the hair, nobody cares. But if you make the eye or the mouth in the wrong place, then everybody's bent out of shape. Unless you're Pablo Picasso. He used to do it on purpose. I think now you guys are armed with what you need to be successful in this project. And hopefully it's going to help you throughout the rest of the term and maybe your life. I have no idea what all this stuff is hanging down here. Sometimes as I draw it, I try to figure it out. And other times it's like, who cares? It's just texture. It's just stuff. I'm not sure I want to put that little plug bayonet in, the little thing that's sticking up right there. It seems a little distracting. So I think for now I'll leave it out. If I decide I could come back in and put it in. I am now getting rid of all my graphite. Does it bother you that we didn't draw the sword in? No, because you can still see it. I mean, if you had to, you could go in there and you could do a little hatch lines in there, little edge here or there. But for the most part, you can just leave it out. What about his hand? Does it bother you we didn't draw his hand, his fingers? You see them, don't you? I hate leaving things unfinished. But it is just practice, right? I usually just recycle them, just throw them away. Again, you could go in, and if you had the time, if this was something that you wanted to do, um, as a piece to sell, or you wanted to do some watercolors on top, or wanted to make it really nice, there's a lot you could do with this. But again, we're just practicing, just doing ink practice. Hopefully you've enjoyed being here. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you've had an enjoyable time doing it. And I appreciate you being here. Appreciate drawing with me. Whatever your purpose for drawing, if you're just trying to get better, if you're just trying a new style or a new technique, or just trying to overcome some of your fears, I wish you luck. And if there's anything I can do for you, please comment. This is all about making things better, hopefully for you. Art makes life better. And hopefully your life has been a little better because you drew with me today. Good place for a signature is right over his shoulder over here where that plug bayonet was going to go. And I think that's a good spot for it. And I hope you have a lovely day.